Back in June, Blizzard put out a humongous blue post talking about all the things they take into consideration when making changes. Some of the changes they told us about were emblems being less convoluted, where in each tier of content we used to get a shiny new named emblem drop. Instead, they'll just be keeping it basic, having a 5-man and old content emblem being Heroism, and a current tier emblem coming from raids, and your daily heroic of course, being the Emblems of Valor. On top of that, they also told us about the same emblems dropping in both 10 and 25-man. But an interesting part of this post, which I've not really seen anyone talk about in any great detail, is what the second change in their itemization change section was: the scaling difficulty of heroic dungeons. Here is exactly what they said. The second goal is about making sure heroic dungeons stay attractive throughout the entire expansion. The emblems and items they drop should always be valuable, even late in the expansion. They should also remain an interesting challenge throughout the entire expansion rather than becoming excessively easy as your gear improves. We are exploring plans to add challenges to heroic dungeons as the expansion proceeds, which would also provide more valuable rewards. Now, I want you to remember this is just my view on how it could work, just speculating what Blizzard may, or in fact should, do with this system. So starting with a fairly obvious thing, which is emblems. They say themselves the emblems and items they drop should always be valuable. On the basis they're simplifying the emblem system, the way it will more than likely work is with each tier of content, all the items that are available for the current tier emblem prior to the new content drop-in will drop down to Emblem of Heroism, which are obtainable through heroics. So for a real-life example, when Ulduar comes out, all the Emblem of Valor items from Phase 1 will drop down to Emblem of Heroism. Now this ticks a box of keeping heroics relevant in each phase, because it's a good way of getting catch-up gear to get you into the current tier of content. It, however, doesn't do anything for the difficulty. This is where things start to get a little bit complicated, so just follow along. From level 80, the item level progression goes from questing blues and some blue crafted gear, which is 187 item level, going up to 200 item level from 10-man raids and heroic dungeons, and finally all the way up to 226 item level from the hardest 25-man bosses of Phase 1. So we need to look at this from two perspectives. Firstly, the person who's been raiding all of Phase 1 and is literally in full BIS gear. And then look at it from the person who is in full greens and just ding level 80. Firstly, the full BIS Phase 1 guy. When Ulduar drops, also known as Phase 2, there is still reason to do heroics because you can start to get another couple of tier pieces, which is now going to be tier 8 gear. These will come from the new Emblem of Valor vendor, which back in the day would have been the Emblem of Conquest vendor. Although you'll only need to do one heroic a day, your daily heroic, to get the Emblem of Valor reward. But on the other hand, you can now get the BOE bracers, for an example, to be able to sell from emblems that come from heroics, which used to be for Valor. All the gear from the new vendor is 226 item level, which is the same as non-hard mode 25-man Ulduar bosses. But wait, you're thinking, well, I've been raiding Naxx every single week and I've got all of my gear and I've got tons and tons of Emblems of Valor left over, so I'll just buy all my tier 8 gear when Ulduar comes out. Well, no, because this is the first thing Blizzard need to consider. They'd need to do a Valor reset on patch day of each phase of content. Much like how arena points convert to honor between seasons, Valor would simply need to be transferred to Heroism. Now, nothing changes here because everything you could spend your Emblems of Valor on the day before the phase launches, you can still spend on it the day of the phase launching, but this time you're using Emblems of Heroism instead of Valor. This historically makes no change whatsoever at all, because you used to be able to trade down the highest level of emblem down to a tier lower. So at a 1-to-1 rate, you could trade Valor for Heroism or Conquest for Valor to then trade Valor to Heroism. And of course, it goes without saying that all Phase 1 raids on the release of Phase 2 would need to be changed to drop Emblems of Heroism as well. So it's only current tier raids that drop Valor. I said goes without saying and then said it. Whatever. Now we've established the minor systematic changes that would need to be made, let's get back to where we was. We was a full BIS Phase 1 geared Druid, let's say, just doing our one heroic a day to get the 2 Emblems of Valor that come as a reward. It's absolutely face roll content because of all of our gear, and just not that much fun. So this is where the difficulty comes in. Phase 1 heroics are just a standard heroic, and when Phase 2 hits, there should now be Heroic Plus. You might instantly be thinking, oh yeah, and in Phase 3, what's it going to be? Heroic Plus Plus? No, obviously not. You don't need multiple difficulties, you just need a current tier difficulty. So in Phase 2, Heroic Plus will have all the same trash, all the same bosses, all the same tactics, but just increased health and increased damage to the point where mechanics are not forgiving at all. If you get hit by something, it can bring you near death. All the items that the bosses drop are exactly the same, but scaled up in item level to that of 10-man current content. Thinking of Phase 1, the gear that drops is 200 eye level, like in Nax 10. So the gear that will drop in Heroic Plus in Phase 2 will be 219 item level, and the end boss of every Heroic gives one, that's all, just one Emblem of Valor. That one Emblem of Valor is seriously enough to make people want to spam Heroics as much as possible just to get their tier or other Valor items that little bit quicker going into a new phase of content. If you want to be generous, drop 2, but I honestly feel like 1 is enough. These Heroics need to be tuned with being reasonably geared in mind. Yes, a very well-skilled, lower-geared group may get through it, but ultimately this more difficult yet more rewarding Heroic content is here to keep the content relevant. Can you have 3 to 4 really well-geared people and drag 1 or 2 less-geared people through? Sure. I'm not talking so tuned that 5 people in Nax 25 gear are going to be massively challenged, but just difficult enough that it would be incredibly hard for a full group of freshly dinged people to even think about being able to complete one. The gap on this Heroic difficulty will just get bigger and bigger as the expansion continues. The Phase 3 Heroic Plus dungeon would completely supersede the Phase 2 version, now being tuned for people in Ulduar raid gear and drop in TOC 10 equivalent gear. But you have to remember the itemization is the biggest difference. You're going to lack significant amounts of armor pen, which by Phase 3 a lot of classes will want. The trinkets will be lackluster compared to raids, so on and so forth. So it's never going to be a replacement to raiding, it's just you may potentially get an upgrade, and it'd be really interesting to see things like the Sphere from Nexus, or even Mark of the War Prisoner from Violet Hold, because seeing these scaled up in item level really could change BIS lists potentially. I'm not saying it would, but it could. Now that's the geared players. What about the freshly dinged fella who wants to start getting gear? Well, no matter what phase you're starting in or re-rolling in, the later the phase, the more option for gear from Emblems of Heroism from spamming your standard Heroic dungeons. Being able to get all 4 pieces of tier just from Heroics and then testing your might to see if you can handle a Heroic Plus to start getting that extra Emblem of Valor from each dungeon and potentially getting some gear to get you into current tier of raids quicker. And remember, I would keep the gear that drops in the Heroics as blue still. Yes, they're scaled up in item level, but they're still only blue. And it's like when you compare a 200 eye level blue to a 200 eye level epic, the epic is actually better still. So having them slightly scaled down versions of, let's say during Ulduar 219 eye level. So a 219 eye level blue isn't really going to hold up against a 219 eye level epic. So a natural order of progression could look something like going in and doing the older raids, going and doing your 5-man Heroics, getting as much Emblem of Heroism gear as possible, then you can start spamming your Heroic Plus, which is going to get you into the current content, being probably 10-man to begin with enough gear more than likely to go straight into 25. If you're worried that people with no gear, freshly dinged, are going to struggle getting into groups, this would probably only hold true for a few weeks at the start of a content phase, because once you've got everything you want from the Valor vendor, you might as well go and do your daily Heroic on the normal version, assuming there isn't any items that you want from the sort of Heroic version, the scaled up blues, which if you've got all your Valor stuff in the current content, I'd probably say there's not. I mean, technically, because you're doing Heroic Plus versions, you won't really need Emblems of Heroism for anything most likely. They could even have a separate lockout so you can still jump in regular Heroics with people to either pass the time or just help them out. The only place this gets tricky is the sheer amount of emblems you can rack up in later phases, when epic gems are going to be available for Emblems of Heroism, or even things that I mentioned earlier like epic bracers. Is this going to cripple the economy on those items? I do see the whole double lockout as a potential red flag personally, but it was just a thought. A thought I probably wouldn't implement, to be fair. Now, I know there's lots of directions Blizzard could go in, but after deliberating over this upcoming system for hours while staring at my keyboard trying to put it into words, I really do feel this would be the most effective way. Keeping it simple to understand, giving all players, no matter how long you've been on it, good reason to keep doing Heroics every day, but also making it challenging enough even in high levels of gear and rewarding outside of just getting that single emblem. Let's be honest, how amazing would it be to see something like Cleaver drop during Phase 3 and its 232 item level, or even the Nexus Mage during ICC, being 245 equal to that of your mate's Valor. If you enjoyed this video and think this could work, let me know in the comments and tweet Blizzard until your fingers bleed, because we want them to do this system right, because it's an important one. Be sure to like and subscribe, check out Rested XP in the link in the description, and roll the outro. There's lots of ways you can support the channel to keep me here putting out World of Warcraft content and covering all future MMOs. Consider joining the channel as a member. You get access to emotes, everyone will know you're a member when you comment on future videos because you get a nice icon next to your name, and you get access to members-only videos, which I'll be putting a lot of on the channel throughout the year. Additionally, there's a Patreon link in the description as well. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, and I'll see you on the next one.